as the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the city of Jerusalem. And that happened about 1,000 years before Christ. Now let's look at a second piece of history. Stay with me, we're going somewhere. The kingdom of Israel lasted 400 years before it was conquered by the nation of Babylon. And the Babylonians slaughtered most of the Israelites and dragged the rest of them into exile on the outskirts of Babylon. 70 years after this, the Babylonians were conquered by the Persians, and the Persians released the Israelites to return to their homeland. The Jews returned to Israel in waves. The description of those who returned in the second wave is found in Nehemiah chapter 7, which says this: the number of the Israelite men included, and then it lists over 80 groups of descendants who returned home, all the way down to verse 44, which says the singers that returned included Asaph's descendants. So here's what I want to show you with all of that. Asaph played the cymbals in 1000 BC. 148 of his descendants were singing to God 500 years later. One day, a cymbal player by the name of Asaph thought about his children and their faith. He wanted his sons and daughters and their sons and daughters and their sons and daughters and their sons and daughters to love God as much as he did. So he wrote the words to a song, and that song is Psalm 78. The words in that song preserve faith in all generations for 500 years. What kind of words could do that? What kind of song could preserve faith in God for more than 500 years? And even today is helping to preserve faith in us and in our children. Psalm 78 starts with a title, and the title is this: A Maskil of Asaph. Maskil means a teaching song. You remember last week we talked about the fact that the psalm that we were looking at then was a psalm of ascent. It was a song that they sang as they ascended to worship. This song is a song for teaching. It's going to teach us something. Specifically, it's going to teach us to teach our children. But not only is it going to teach us to teach our children, it's going to cause us personally to look back on God's faithfulness, and looking back on God's faithfulness increases our faith. And I don't know about you, but I'm a candidate for God increasing my faith. In fact, just this past week, one of my prayers was this: God, increase my faith. God, there's some things that I don't understand. There's some things I can't figure out. There's some things I can't make happen. God, help me trust you. Increase my faith. So here's what it says. Psalm 78. My people, hear my instruction. Listen to the words from my mouth. I will declare wise sayings. I will speak mysteries from the past, things we have heard and known, and that our ancestors have passed down to us. So in other words, he's not just passing these things down to his children and children's children's children. He's passing down things that have been passed down to him. Basically, what that passage of Scripture says is this: I'm going to retell some history. I'm going to tell some God history, some things we know about God that have been passed down to us by people who experienced them. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I'm convinced we have a next generation obligation That's what the first passages of Psalm 78 basically say. We have a next generation obligation. So I'm going to tell you some stories that have been passed down to us that's going to help teach you. See, our next generation obligation is to pass on our faith. He continues on, the things our God has done. He says in verse 4, we will not hide them from their children, but will tell a future generation the praiseworthy acts of the Lord, His might, and the wondrous works that He's performed. You see, our children need to know who God is. Our children need to know who God is. Not only that, you and I need to know who God is. We need to know indeed who is this God we speak of. And the best way to show children who God is to tell them what He's done. And it's the same way for us. The best way to know who God is to look at what He's done. To look at what He's done. He is the creator of heaven and earth and all that is in them. You see, sometimes I probably shouldn't read posts on social media because I waste time. I don't waste time reading them. I waste time writing out these blistering responses and then realizing that I probably ought not say that and deleting it. And there's this, and I've seen, oh God, can I say this? I've seen this from people in the education system. I've seen this suggested to our educators from others. And it's a statement that just, when I read it, it just went against the grain. And the statement was this: don't teach our kids what to think. Teach them to think. It's like just about everything. There's a measure of positive in that. But here's what a number of parents are saying. I'm not going to influence my kids about God. I'm going to let them make their own decision about Him when they're old enough. They can figure it out for themselves. I'm going to teach them how to think and let them think. Oh my God. If I had been left to my own thoughts as a child, same way with you, this world would be a different place, and I probably wouldn't be in it. Only thing is, they can't figure it out themselves. Nor can you. Nor did you. Because you see, God is invisible. They can't see Him. The way they find out about God is through revelation. The same way that you and I found out about God. God revealed Himself to us through Jesus Christ coming to earth to see what He was like, and through Scripture, which tells the stories of God's actions so we can understand what He's like. Let me explain to you the danger of that thought, the danger of that philosophy. It's kind of like this. I'm not going to teach my children which foods to eat. I'm just going to teach them to eat. Think about it. I'm not going to teach my children which foods to eat. I'm only going to teach them to eat. If you only teach them to eat, not only will they only eat the food that they like, they will also eat the poison that they like. If you don't teach them what is edible and what is not edible, if you don't teach them what things to eat and not to eat, they don't know what causes growth. They don't know what causes health. They don't know what causes disease. I'm just going to let them figure it out themselves. I'm not going to teach my children good habits or bad habits. I'm going to let them just figure it out themselves. I'm going to leave them to their own wisdom, because I don't want to tarnish them. I don't want to hold them back. I want them to be free. Let them be free. Let them be free. See what happens. The same thing that would happen if you and I lived in that same philosophy. Nobody can tell me what to eat. Nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can tell me how to think. Our kids are going to be exposed to all kind of misinformation about God. If they don't hear the truth about it from us, they may never know the truth about Him. And it's the same way with adults. I told you this is not just for people who have kids. It's the same way with adults. If we don't read the Word, if we don't put ourselves in a place of learning about God and learning what He's been like and learning what He's done throughout history, then we'll believe anything. Asaph decided to teach his children and our children about God. To do that, he told stories about God, stories about what God had done in the history of His people. And that's what Psalm 78 is all about. Verse 5 of Psalm 78 says this: He established a testimony in Jacob and set up a law in Israel, which He commanded our ancestors to teach their children, so that a future generation, children yet to be born, might know. How did He do that? At Mount Sinai, God gave the law and the 10 Commandments. Asaph continues. They were to rise and tell their children so that they might put their confidence in God and not forget God's works, but keep His commands. If we teach our kids God's deeds, I believe they will put their confidence in God. Everybody puts their confidence in something. Teach kids what God has done, and they will have confidence in Him. You put your confidence in something. Look at the history of what God has done. And I believe if you look at the history of what God has done and you dwell on that history of what God has done, then you too will put your confidence in Him. Verse 8 says, "Then they would not be like their ancestors, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not loyal and whose spirit was not faithful to God." You see, the first generation who heard the law at Mount Sinai didn't believe it. They had a crisis of faith. God told them to go conquer the promised land, but they refused. So God let them die in the desert. Then in the book of Deuteronomy, He gave the law again. And the second time, their children believed and conquered. Do you see what Asaph was doing? For 72 verses of Psalm 78, he's doing the same thing we have to do with our children over and over and over again. He's doing the same thing that needs to happen right over there in kids' church every week. He tells them about the wonders of God who made them and loves them and is with them all the time. Asaph is passing the history of his people on to the next generation. Let me tell you something sad. There are many people, teenagers today, if you talk to them about Jonah and the whale, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. If they sang the song, "I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants," they wouldn't know the story. On and on and on I could go. And the reason is they've never been taught. They've never been in an environment where they are taught what God is like. The nation of Israel was made up of 12 tribes. Let me back up for a minute. I'm going to give you some history to give some greater context to the next group of verses that we're going to read, okay? So the nation of Israel was made up of 12 tribes. 3 of those tribes were Joseph, Levi, and Judah. Joseph was a favorite son of his father Israel. His tribe became the largest and most important of all the tribes. So the tribe actually became so large and important that the tribe of Joseph was over twice as large as any of the other tribes. When it came time to divide up the land of Israel, the tribe of Levi wasn't given any land. They were the priestly tribe. Their job was to lead worship and make sacrifices in the temple. They were the preachers. They were the pastors, okay? They didn't get any land. So their livelihood was derived not from the land, but from the sacrifices that the other tribes brought to the temple. Now, I could go there out on a limb. I could chase a rabbit trail and talk about how folks think that the pastor ought not be paid, and on and on and on. However, I won't go there. But there's precedent. Meanwhile, the largest tribe was going to need the largest portion of land. And since Joseph's tribe was so large, it became divided into 2 tribes. Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. The firstborn was Ephraim. So the tribe of Levi, serving as a special function, God then broke the tribe of Joseph into 2 tribes, the tribe of Ephraim, the firstborn, and the tribe of Manasseh, the secondborn, so that there was 12 tribes. Now let's keep reading. Verse 9 says, "The Ephraimite archers turned back on the day of battle. They didn't keep God's covenant and refused to live by His law. They forgot what He had done, the wondrous works that He had shown them. So of these two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim turned back. They forgot what he had done, what God had done, the wondrous works that He had shown them. Everyone puts their confidence in something. If we teach them about God, they will put their trust in Him. But here's the deal. If we don't teach them God's deeds, the tribe will crumble. The people of Ephraim did three things wrong. They shrunk back on the day of battle. You know why? Because they didn't believe that God would fight for them. If they had been taught, they would know. They would have known that they could trust God and that God would fight for them. So they acted in fear, not in faith, and they turned back on the day of battle. The second thing they did wrong, they didn't live morally. They refused to live by the law. They decided to do whatever pleased themselves. And the third thing was this: they forgot what God had done. All throughout the Exodus, God worked wonders for Israel. And the Ephraimites saw it. They were there. They witnessed it. But they didn't pass it on to their kids. Verse 12 says, He worked wonders in the sight of their ancestors in the land of Egypt, the territory of Zoan. Zoan was the capital city of Egypt. The Ephraimites watched God deliver Israel from Egypt during the 10 plagues. But when it came to battle, they forgot all about God's faithfulness and shrunk back in faithlessness. You see, if God has done something for you, if He has fought a battle for you, if He has come through for you, if He has made a way where there seemed to be no way, your kids need to know. This next generation needs to know. Now, I'll tell you this. They don't have to know every detail, okay? They don't have to know every bloody, nasty, stinky detail. But if God has come through for you, your children, this next generation needs to know that God came through for you. Because what that does is that creates faith within them. It creates trust within them that the same God that worked for you will work for them. We sang earlier, He is the same God. He is the same God. Is He or is He not? If He's the same God, then let's tell the next generation about the same God that works wonders in our lives and comes through for us. Asaph continues. He split the sea, brought them across. The water stood firm like a wall. You know this part of the story. God parted the Red Sea. Why? Because God is a delivering God. That's why. When His children are trapped and have no place to turn, He provides a way out. Verse 14 says, He led them with a cloud by day and with a fiery light throughout the night. God is a guiding God. Once they got out of Egypt, they needed to know where to go. So God led them by day and night. He never leaves us to wander on our own. Doesn't our next generation need to know these things? Don't our children need to know these things? He split rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink as abundant as the depths. He brought streams out of the stone and made water flow down like rivers. Doesn't our next generation need to know that God is a powerful and providing God? He splits rocks to provide water. God was faithful to Israel all throughout Exodus. Asaph is showing the next generation what God is like by telling them what He has done. we are just trying to make it through the week. We are just trying to figure out what's the next thing we need to do. What plate do I need to spin next? Is it the plate of finances? Is it the plate of relationships? Is it the plate of career? Is it the plate of taking care of things at the house? Is it the plate of getting this yard cut? See, Psalm 78 has 72 verses in it. Don't worry. We're not going to all of them. In the verses that follow, Asaph tells the stories of God feeding them manna from heaven, and when they got tired of the manna, he sent them quail to provide them a change of diet. Verse 27 says, he rained meat on them like dust and winged birds like the sand of the seas. Verse 32, Asaph reminds them of what God does when his children are unfaithful. Despite all this, verse 32 says, they kept sinning and did not believe his wondrous works. And then it goes on to say, but they deceived him with their mouths, they lied to him with their tongues, their hearts were insincere toward him, and they were unfaithful to his covenant. Yet he was compassionate, he atoned for their iniquity, and did not destroy them. He often turned his anger aside and did not unleash his wrath. He remembered that they were only flesh and wind that passes and does not return. So what he's teaching is this: even though they were not faithful, God remained faithful. Do you know what I'm seeing in some of our younger generation today is that when they fail, they feel like they might as well give up. I'm talking about people, young people that have been in church, and they go away, and then you see some post or you hear some news that they failed in some way, and they're ready to just give up. Asaph basically said, listen, you'll fall. You won't be always faithful, but listen, God is always faithful. They constantly tested God and provoked the Holy One of Israel. Why did they constantly test him? Here's why. It's in verse 42. It says they did not remember. They tested him because they did not remember. Have you ever told a child something and the next hour they were right back doing the same thing you told them not to? Do you know why? It's not always because they're just flat out rebellious. Sometimes it's because they just don't remember. Verse 42 says they did not remember his power shown on the day he redeemed them from the foe, when he performed his his miraculous signs in Egypt, his wonders in the territory of Zon. Here's what it comes down to. Not just for kids, okay? If you don't hear anything else, hear this. When we forget what God has done, we start living by sight and not by faith. When we forget what God has done, or If a child never knows what God has done, how can he live by faith, he or she live by faith? They can only live by sight. So to me, one of the greatest tragedies of all is to have children who don't know what our God has done. They can only walk by sight. They can only walk by what they see. They can only respond to what little bit that they know, what they've experienced themselves. Asaph is teaching lessons about God to the generations to come. He's using stories to do it, stories of God's faithfulness and stories of people's unfaithfulness. So how important is it not only to teach our children, but how important is it to remember what God has done for us? It's an entirely different ballgame. Because you see, we're called to walk by faith and not by sight. We can't see God. So we have to trust Him without seeing. We can't see, but we can hear, and we can remember what God has done. And when we remember, we trust. And when we trust, we walk by faith. One day, a cymbal player by the name of Asaph looked at his children and said, I want them to walk by faith. How can I help them do that? His solution was to tell them the stories of God's faithfulness. That one technique, that one practice was so effective that his children's children were still singing God's praise 500 years later. How would you like to know that your children's 500 years from now, because you shared, because you taught them the things of God, are able to walk in faith and trust God? And I don't know about you, but as I look around at this world, I believe that more and more and more and more. Truth is, I don't think they'll be here 500 years from now. But the fact is this, the direction the world is going, how much faith, how much hope and help is the next generation going to need? So let's not remain silent. If you have children, don't remain silent. If you have children, don't keep them away from the house of God. Let them come and be taught. If you have grandchildren, pray for them. Nieces, nephews, those that are under your care. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I think that probably one of the reasons that I'm here today preaching the gospel is because of some praying teachers at Huffman High School back in the late 70s and 80s. That's not when I graduated. I graduated like 20 years ago. But anyway. Honestly, I know they were praying to. I know they were. Praying parents, praying grandparents. But it's not enough just to pray. We got to open our mouths. You stand with me today? When you think about helping this next generation, even when you think about your own walk, teach this next generation what God has done. Teach them that God doesn't change. And teach them what God has done for your family.